She woke up and said nothing. The antiseptic scent of the hospital room hit her first cold, clean, unforgiving. Vanessa Cole opened her eyes to a wall of dim light and indistinct shapes, but she didn't flinch. She remembered the crunch of metal, the screech of brakes. A nurse's voice filtered through the fog. "Mrs. Cole, you're lucky. A mild concussion, some bruising. The impact caused temporary blindness. It should pass." The words felt distant, like they were meant for someone else. Vanessa blinked, slowly, deliberately. She could see faint shadows, the soft bloom of the monitor light, the dull outline of her hand on the blanket. But she didn't say a word. She wasn't blind. Not really. Her heart thundered under her, ribs like it was trying to claw its way out. Her mind, usually sharp enough to cut through boardrooms, now twisted around one thought. Asterisk, why lie? Why not speak up, demand an ophthalmologist, call her assistant, get back to the life she'd so ruthlessly built? Because this was an opportunity. Because for months, maybe longer, something had felt off. Her husband, Michael, had changed. The man who once painted murals on her office walls and whispered poetry into her neck had become a stranger who spent too much time applying for grants and not enough explaining the late nights. The strange calls, the passwords changed without a word. She had asked, gently at first, then not so gently. He'd smiled, pulled her close, and said she was imagining things. "You've been stressed, babe. You always think something's broken when you're overwhelmed." And maybe she had believed that. Maybe she had wanted to. But now no one expected her to see. If I can't see, she thought, maybe I'll finally see the truth. The silence stretched. A nurse murmured something and stepped out. Vanessa kept her eyes unfocused, her face blank. She listened, the click of heels down the hallway, the hum of distant machines, and then footsteps, slower, familiar. Michael, he entered the room quietly, but not quietly enough. Vanessa heard the hesitation. A pause, one beat, two, that second. "Too long, babe," he said, and his voice was soft, careful. Vanessa didn't move. Behind her stillness, her brain blazed. Every sound, every breath, every word from now on could be a thread to pull. If he was hiding something, this was her chance to find it while hidden in plain sight. Because sometimes, the only way to see the truth is to stop looking for it, and say nothing. The marriage people, enviant, they did. Vanessa Cole wasn't always the face on magazine covers, the keynote speaker at global tech conferences, or the woman who built one of the most innovative fintech companies on the African continent from nothing but a stubborn vision and a second-hand laptop. She had once been just a young, overworked, underpaid software engineer in Lagos, with a dream and no roadmap. The nights were long, the power outages relentless, and the doubt suffocating. And in the middle of all that, Michael, a painter with wild ambition and a gentleness that wrapped itself around her like safety. He believed in her when she couldn't afford to. He told her she could change the world with her code, and she almost laughed at him then. But when he sold one of his best canvases to help her cover hosting costs for her prototype's beta test, she stopped laughing. They became each other's everything, business partners in spirit, if not in law, and soulmates in every way that counted. In those early days, she worked on the floor of their cramped apartment while he brought her food, massaged her aching shoulders, and promised that one day they'd live in a house with power that didn't go out every other night. She launched her first app from that very floor. He was her first investor, her biggest cheerleader. And when the funding came in, Local, then international Michael toasted with cheap wine and told her it was only the beginning. They married quietly, quickly, as if afraid success might tear them apart before love could root itself. For a long time, it worked. But somewhere between Series B and the launch of her third product line, things changed. Michael changed. It started small. He began missing her investor dinners. "It's your world," he'd say with a shrug. "I don't fit in with all that corporate nonsense." She brushed it off. At first he had always been a bit rebellious, a free spirit. But then came the money questions. Missing transactions. "Just some art supplies," he claimed. "You spend 10 times that in one day without blinking." She let it slide. Then more absences, more vague answers. Once her hyper-efficient assistant casually mentioned seeing Michael at an upscale restaurant, having lunch with a woman no one could place. Vanessa smiled, filed the information away, and didn't mention it. Her friends started shifting their tone. "He's proud of you, right?" One asked carefully over drinks. "I mean, not every man can handle a woman like you." Another tried to cloak it in humor. "You know you scare him a little, yeah. Power couples aren't built equal." Vanessa laughed with them, too proud to admit the chill growing in her gut. She had ignored the signs, even when her mother blunt as ever warned her, "A real man is never afraid of a strong woman. He builds with her. If he starts shrinking, it's because he was never big enough to stand beside you." At home, Michael grew more brittle. He accused her of vanishing into her work, of ordering him around like one of her interns. "You treat everyone like they're beneath you now," he snapped once. During an argument she couldn't even remember the start of. "You used to need me." "I still do," she said quietly, and for a moment he looked like he wanted to believe her, but then he turned away. She tried. God, she tried. Vacations he cancelled last minute. Date nights he forgot. Conversations that turned into accusations. He said he felt useless, like a prop. Said she was too much. Vanessa, who once changed the direction of an entire startup mid-pitch, couldn't even fix her marriage. So when the car spun out on that wet road and the doctors said her blindness was temporary, she sat there in the sterile light and told them she couldn't see, told them nothing more. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't madness, it was strategy. If she was blind, truly blind, she wouldn't be expected to notice things. Not phones buzzing, not glances exchanged, not the scent of unfamiliar perfume or the silence that followed certain questions. It was a dangerous charade, yes, but it was also clarity wrapped in deception. A chance to listen without reacting, to observe without the pressure to explain her intuition. Because Vanessa wasn't just a CEO, she was an engineer. She debugged systems, analyzed faults, tested for vulnerabilities. And right now, her marriage was the code in question. Michael thought she couldn't see him, but for the first time in a long time, Vanessa was finally ready to look. The first lie I heard with my eyes closed wasn't really the first, but it was the one that shattered the last thread of doubt. Vanessa lay motionless in her hospital bed, her breathing steady, eyes half-lidded in practiced stillness. The room had been quiet for a while, save for the hum of machines and the occasional footstep in the hallway. Then she heard the faint click of a door closing and Michael's familiar voice, low and cautious. "Yeah," he said into the phone, just a few feet from her. "She's out, still blind." A pause. Then, more confident, "Don't worry, as long as I keep playing the perfect husband, the account transfer will be smooth." Another pause. His voice lowered to a near whisper, but she caught it. Asterisk, after that, we disappear. Asterisk, the words sliced through her like glass. Her hands didn't move, but her mind exploded in 100 directions at once. Asterisk, account transfer, disappear. There it was, confirmation. Not just suspicion, not just the uneasy intuition that had been clawing at her for months. He was planning something criminal and cruel, and he thought she couldn't see him. Thought her darkness was total. She wanted to scream too. Sit up, to rip the phone from his hand and demand the truth. But she didn't. She lay still, perfectly still, and let her silence become her armor. The next day, he returned not alone. The woman he brought with him was too well dressed, too smug, too familiar. "This is my cousin, Amaka," Michael said, a little too brightly. Vanessa kept her expression blank, but she knew. She'd heard that voice before Artagala last. Yeah, laughing near the champagne bar, hand resting far too comfortably on Michael's shoulder. Not a cousin, not even a good lie. They spoke around her like she was furniture. "Poor thing," the woman said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. So strong, yet so helpless. Michael chuckled. "She's always been a fighter. That's what makes this so ironic." Vanessa clenched her jaw subtly, let a single tear fall for effect. Let them think they've won. From that moment, the game changed. She faked disorientation when Michael fed her soup, fumbled with the spoon like she couldn't tell where her mouth was. She asked for help getting to the bathroom, noting the exact drawer he shoved his second phone into when he thought she was too blind to notice. She let them treat her like a fool so she could track their every move. She wasn't just pretending to be blind. Now she was hunting that night. Once she was alone, Vanessa slowly reached under her blanket and tapped out a message on her own phone's silent mode. No vibration. Asterisk, Maya, I need you. Say nothing. Come. Tomorrow, bring a recorder. Asterisk, Maya, her closest friend and one of the sharpest legal minds, Sheena replied within minutes. On my way. The next day, when Michael stepped out for a coffee, Vanessa had Maya place a tiny recording device under the side table and a second one hidden in a stuffed bear from a well-meaning nurse. She instructed her to begin reviewing the shared assets, accounts, and anything suspicious tied to Michael's name. She told her everything well, almost everything. Enough to make Maya's silence go stone cold. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, manipulation, possibly conspiracy. Vanessa didn't cry. She took notes. By the time Michael returned, smiling like the snake he was, Vanessa had settled into her new role. The helpless wife, the poor broken genius, the blind queen in a glass castle. But now she was building her own trap with his every word, every smirk, every lie. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was war. How do you pretend to be blind when you're watching your marriage burn? Back at home, Vanessa moved like a shadow in her own life. Michael had insisted on taking care of her, playing the doting husband in front of the neighbors who dropped by with flowers and food. She's holding up so well, he'd say with a smile, arm around her, guiding her gently like a man devoted to love, not deception. Behind the closed door, however, the warmth evaporated. His touch became perfunctory, his tone clipped, his words edged with irritation. "You should be grateful," he muttered once while helping her sit. "At least, now you're not running 10 steps ahead of everyone else." He forgot to stay kind when no one was watching. The mask he wore in public slipped easily behind walls. He sighed heavily when she asked for help finding her shoes. he barked when she moved too slowly. Honestly, Vanessa, he snapped one afternoon, you've always needed to be the center of everything. Even blind, you make it about you. At night, he whispered on his phone, curled away from her in bed. She could hear the low buzz of messages arriving, his fingers tapping rapidly against the screen. Once, he chuckled under his breath. "Miss me," he typed. Vanessa didn't need her eyes to feel the heat of betrayal settle between them like a third presence in the bed. She turned her face to the wall and stayed silent, memorizing the rhythm of his deceit. Then came the transfer alert, 10 million, pulled from one of her company's operational accounts. She had set up real-time notifications for every major transaction years ago. The ping came through her smartwatch, the vibration sharp and nauseating. She hadn't authorized anything. She didn't need to guess who had. That night, around 11 p.m., Michael left the house, claimed he needed to get painkillers for her. Vanessa, wrapped in her robe and still playing the fragile patient, waited 10 minutes, then crept to her office. She'd learned every creak in the hallway, every step to avoid. From her home security dashboard, she accessed the camera feed he didn't know existed, the one facing the back gate. There he was, hoodie up, climbing into a rideshare car. She tracked the location, a mid-range hotel in Ikoye. She screenshot the route, saved it to a hidden folder, then returned to bed before he returned an hour later, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume and guilt. That week, Vanessa turned surveillance into survival. She logged every suspicious message from his burner phone, noting times, phrases, tone. She used voice memos to record their conversations, even the mundane ones, because within the mundane, Michael slipped. She sent Tara, her assistant and confidant, to bait him, posing as a foreign client interested in real estate investment. At the cafe meeting, Michael bragged, puffed up with arrogance. "She'll never see it coming," he said, laughing, not realizing every word was being recorded. Literally, Vanessa watched the playback later that night and didn't move, didn't speak, just sat in her dim-lit office while the shell of her marriage collapsed in real time, and still, she stayed quiet, because she wasn't done building the case. But something in her cracked one night. Michael fell asleep beside her, snoring softly, his arm grazing her back as if he still belonged there. Vanessa stared at the ceiling she could barely make out in the dark. Her chest ached from the weight of everything she had buried, the signs she ignored, the truths she swallowed to protect the illusion of a happy home, the hope she'd nursed far too long that the man who once helped her dream was still somewhere. Beneath the bitterness, tears spilled silently down her cheeks, soaking into the pillow as she really cried for the first time since this all began. She wasn't just mourning the betrayal, she was mourning herself, the version of her that believed loyalty was enough, that success would be shared, that love, once real, could survive ambition, jealousy, and distance. She had ignored the first lie, then the second, and eventually built a life on the denial that came with the third, the fourth, the 10th. Her blindness, this false one, was revealing a much older blindness, the one where she excused disrespect in the name of love, where she shrunk herself at home after expanding herself everywhere else, because it wasn't just Michael who had changed. Vanessa had changed too, so focused on proving her worth to the world that she forgot to ask who was still standing beside her, and why. She thought success could protect her from heartbreak. Instead, it had made it sharper, colder, more humiliating. She wiped her tears, quiet and determined. The cameras were rolling. The bank accounts were being traced. The The legal documents were building. She wasn't pretending to be blind anymore. She was preparing to see everything clearly, fully, before burning the illusion down herself. The dinner party shimmered with the glow of staged celebration. Vanessa had called it a recovery dinner, a chance to thank those who had supported her since the accident. The living room was warm, stylish, filled with laughter and soft jazz. Friends from her tech circle mingled with longtime colleagues, sipping wine and offering sympathetic smiles. Even Michael played his part well, gliding from guest to guest, hand resting lightly on Vanessa's shoulder, his voice full of pride. "She's been incredible," he said to a group near the fireplace. "Even in darkness, she shines." He lifted his glass and grinned. "To my brilliant wife." Vanessa smiled politely, sunglasses shielding her eyes, every move calculated. Michael's lover Marcus stood near the bar, disguised as a concerned family friend, though Vanessa had invited her by name. "Michael said you were like a sister to him," she told her on the phone, voice syrup sweet. "It would mean a lot if you came." The woman couldn't resist. Deceivers rarely could when they thought the person they'd betrayed was still in the dark. Dinner was served, laughter rising and falling in waves, until the moment Vanessa had rehearsed arrived. Michael clinked his glass again and stood for a speech. He spoke like a man rehearsing a fantasy, his voice filled with practiced affection. "Vanessa is the strongest woman I've ever known," he said. "This accident, this moment in our lives, has reminded me how precious love is. I am honored to be by her side." A few guests clapped, others offered nods of approval. Vanessa stood slowly, placing a careful hand on the edge of the table for effect. The room quieted. "Michael," she said, her voice even, measured, "would you mind telling everyone what you did with the 10 million? A silence so heavy, it seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Michael blinked, lips parting, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you talking about?" He laughed nervously. Vanessa reached up and slowly removed her sunglasses. Gasps rippled around the table. Her eyes were clear, steady, unblinking. "You see," she said, turning to him fully, "I've been able to see for a while now, and unfortunately, I've also seen who you really are." Michael's face paled. She pulled a small remote from her pocket and pressed play. From the living room, speakers came, Michael's own voice, low, secretive, asterisk, "Yeah, she's out. Still blind, don't worry. As long as I keep playing the perfect husband, the account transfer will be smooth. After that, we disappear." Asterisk, gasps, whispers. A wine glass shattered somewhere. Amika's face drained of color. "I think that's your cue," Vanessa said to her. Cool and sharp. Amika fled, heels clicking frantically against the tile. Michael stammered, hands raised slightly like he was trying to stop a tidal wave with nothing but breath. "Vanessa, this isn't." "No," she said, voice slicing through the noise. "It is, and they've all heard it now. My legal team has everything: recordings, account logs, witness statements. I gave you every chance to come clean. Instead, you tried to steal from me, from the company we built. But here's what you misunderstood, Michael." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something intimate, final. "You once helped build my empire, but you thought that made you entitled to own it. You were wrong." He stood frozen, surrounded not by allies but by stunned observers, friends who had admired them, investors who had trusted them, colleagues who had once seen them as a power couple. Now, only one half of that equation stood unbroken. Vanessa turned to the room, lifting her glass. "To clarity, she said. "It comes at a cost, but it's worth every penny." She drank slowly, savoring the moment. And when she lowered the glass, she didn't even glance at Michael again. He was already history the morning after the dinner party. Vanessa stood by her bedroom window, sunlight flooding the room, and made the call she had rehearsed in her mind for weeks. Calmly, precisely, she instructed her lawyer, Maya, to file for divorce. No hesitation, no delay. By noon, the joint accounts were frozen, every asset traced, and the legal paperwork for fraud and misappropriation of marital funds had been filed. What Michael thought would be a private betrayal spiraled swiftly into a public scandal. Headlines lit up across business blogs and social media. Asterisk Tech CEO exposes husband's fraud in shocking public reveal. The betrayal, the deception, the twisted irony of him using her supposed blindness as a cover-it all captured attention. But it was Vanessa's composure that turned heads. She didn't hide. She didn't crumble. Vanessa attended board meetings. With her head high, briefed her executive team with clarity, and made it known that her leadership was untouched by personal chaos. Her board stood behind her without hesitation. Shareholders applauded her transparency. She was no longer the woman silently doubting her own instincts. She was the woman who turned survival into strategy. Days later, Amaka, Michael's lover, came forward in a public statement, admitting she was promised a joint venture funded by Vanessa's diverted capital wart. Michael pitched as a new business meant to free them both from Vanessa's shadow. Vanessa didn't flinch. She worked with Maya to ensure both were named in the legal proceedings. She had no interest in vengeance, but she believed in consequences, and something in her shifted. Beyond the courtroom and cameras, Vanessa felt the deeper fracture that needed tending not in her finances, but in the way women like her were often isolated in power. Smart, successful, and yet told to dim their light to protect fragile egos. She knew she wasn't alone. So she launched a small foundation, Vision Beyond Eyesight, dedicated to helping women navigate, escape, and recover from manipulative relationships. It offered counseling, legal support, and career transition grants. It gave women what she once lacked, a safe place to admit the truth. In a press interview weeks later, a journalist asked what she had learned from it all. Vanessa didn't hesitate. "Sometimes," she said, voice steady, "it's not that we don't see the truth, it's that we're afraid to look directly at it. But when we finally do, there's no going back." Her sight had been restored, but more importantly, her power had been reclaimed. Months later, the cafe was quiet, tucked away from the noise of Lagos, its soft jazz hum a gentle backdrop to the rhythm of healing. Vanessa sat at a corner table, alone at first, dressed simply but elegantly, no longer cloaked in armor, but in clarity. She stirred her tea slowly, her movements unhurried, deliberate. There was no rush now, no illusion to maintain, just space for herself, for peace, for whatever came next. When Terra arrived, smiling as she slid into the seat across from her, they embraced briefly, a quiet understanding passing between them. They'd been through fire together. "Would you ever trust again?" Terra asked after a pause, her tone careful, curious. Vanessa smiled, not bitter, not wounded, but grounded. "Trust," she repeated, letting the word linger. Then, with a soft exhale, "Eventually, but not blindly. Never again." Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. A notification lit the screen. "Your divorce has been finalized." Vanessa read it once, then simply closed the phone and tucked it away. No tears, no celebration, just release. She glanced out the window, the morning sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Then she stood, gathered her bag, and walked to the door. Outside, the world was bright, warm. She paused on the steps, removed her sunglasses, and tilted her face toward the light eyes open, heart steady, finally seeing everything.